This episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly is brought to you by Pixel Empire. Whether for yourself or as a gift to someone else this holiday season, a gaming or pop culture themed print from one of Pixel Empire's featured artists adds a touch of class to anyone's living space. Or you can take their artwork on the go with a t-shirt, hoodie, or phone case. Right now, when you buy one print, you'll get a second one free when you use the code CLASSICFREE at checkout. And shipping is free with orders over $50. Pixel Empire, where pop culture and design unite. On this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly, let's read Nintendo Power Issue 2 from September and October of 1988. Alright, so here we have Nintendo Power Issue number 2 from September and October of 1988. As you can see, this magazine is in very good condition. It does have this little tear in the cover, and aside from just some normal wear, that's really the only thing wrong with it. It still has all of its little inserts. I always try to put these magazines into their sort of time and place context. So obviously this is the fall of 1988. At that time, the Nintendo Entertainment System had been out for 3 years technically, but as I've said on the show before, I think that really the Christmas of 1988 is, at least when I remember, like a lot of kids that I know getting a Nintendo. This is about a year, almost a year before the Game Boy would come out, so there's probably not going to be any Game Boy talk in here at all. Looking more widely at the gaming landscape, at least console gaming landscape, the 16-bit generation had yet to begin in North America, so if you were a home console gamer, you either had an NES or maybe a Sega Master System, or you might have been rocking like an Atari 7800 or something. But that's really all there was, unless you were lucky enough to have a home computer. As you can see, the cover story is Castlevania II: Simon's Quest, which I'll hold off discussing my feelings about that game until we actually get to the section about it. It also talks about Bionic Commando, for which it has a monster review plus fold-out poster, more Super Mario Bros. 2, and that's because, as you may recall, issue number 1 of Nintendo Power, the cover story was Super Mario Bros. 2, and it included a walkthrough of, I think, the first 2 worlds. And that's about it. As we open up the magazine, we have sort of this ad, if you want to call it that. I will mention, for anybody that doesn't know, I mentioned it in the last Nintendo Power read-through as well. These magazines did not have ads, unlike GamePro or EGM. For some reason, when it was the Nintendo Fun Club News, they would have advertising, but Nintendo of America must have decided that with Nintendo Power, they didn't want to have ads anymore. So, I call this an ad, but really it's just a promotion that Nintendo put in there. Again, like I said, this is when a lot more blockbuster games started coming out. And so I think that's kind of the point of something like this, is they're really trying to show the fact that the NES's library is expanding. But the cooler thing that we have here it says, Dear Nintendo Power Player, here is your insider's calendar. So normally this is the kind of thing, if you bought an old magazine like this, this calendar would be long gone. Because, if I had this magazine back when I was a kid, I can guarantee you that I would have taken this calendar out and hung it up on the wall. It's like 4 pages long, so I can't get the entire thing in frame. But, it's just kind of a cool character. You see it's got Mario in here a few times. It starts at September just because this magazine, is the September-October issue. And it has things like, September 15th, new Nintendo Power issue, November 9th, new Nintendo Power issue. And then it has kind of weird things like, did you know that September 22nd was, still is, Scott Baio's birthday? I didn't know that and probably didn't really need to know that, but that's cool. September 24th, the ice cream cone was invented. I don't know, I guess that's kind of cool. But like I said, when I was a kid, this is absolutely the kind of thing that I would have wanted to hang on my wall. And barely on the bottom here, you can see they are showing you at least when they're expecting certain games to come out. So like here it says kick off fall with these exciting game releases in September, and then it mentions Ghostbusters, Galaga or Galaga, Mickey Mouse, Bionic Commando, etc., etc. Down here for October, Xevious 1943, Blaster Master. Down here for December, you have WrestleMania, of course, Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link, which was a huge release. And then as we go down here, yeah, they don't have anything as you get into the next year, just because that was I think too far out for them to really be able to say, oh yeah, there'll be a game coming out, 6 months from now. So next page you have the table of contents, which we always skip. And then we get right into our first feature, which they called a mega review. They're really not reviews in these Nintendo Power magazines. It's like, here's a presentation of what the game is like. I mean, really, in some ways, it's like the way I feature games on my show. I don't really review them. Like, I'm not trying to give them a score and say if they're good or not. I'm just sort of showcasing them, and that's what I would say Nintendo Power is normally doing in these magazines. It's more like, here's what the game is like and how to play it, and maybe a partial walkthrough or something. So here we have Bionic Commando, which was a Capcom release. Bionic Commando did start out in the arcades, but the arcade game is completely different. You can go on YouTube or wherever and look up some footage of Bionic Commando, and you'll see, you still have your little guy with his grappling hook and a gun, but that's where the similarities really kind of end. The levels are all completely different. Apparently, when Bionic Commando came out on the Famicom in Japan, it was called like Hitler's Resurrection, and somehow Hitler was coming back from the dead and you were fighting Nazis. But of course, Nintendo of America rather, they were very sensitive about stuff like that coming out in this country. So they changed the plot a little bit and turned it into a sequel of the original Commando, Capcom's Commando, which was also released on the NES. And the plot of Bionic Commando is that the main character of Commando, Super Joe, has been kidnapped, and you're trying to rescue him. But what makes Bionic Commando cool and unique is the gameplay mechanic that I already kind of alluded to, which is this grappling hook. So like the first time I played Bionic Commando, I didn't really like it because it's a side-scrolling, action platformer, but you can't jump. And that just seems like so foreign. Like, how can you not jump? Well, instead of jumping, you have a grappling hook, and you like grapple onto ledges or platforms above you, and then you can like swing around or pull yourself up to that next platform. And it really makes the game very unique among the myriad of other side-scrolling action platformers that came out on the NES. But so when you play it for the first time, you might think, I'm not sure if I like this game. But if you just give it a chance, you'll see how great of a game it really is. And as they get into it here, so this is what I'm talking about. Really, it's more of like they're just sort of educating you on the game and how it works. So as they're showing you here, the game actually has a map, and you can move around freely on this map between stages. And you can end up in hostile areas or in neutral areas where maybe you're just picking up power-ups and whatnot. And then here they're just getting into a straight-up walkthrough of the game, showing you these stitched together representations of the levels and what you have to do to get through them. And this takes you all the way to, this is sort of the boss battle, if you want to call it that, at the end of level 1. It's really not a boss battle because you're shooting sort of this energy core while like waves and waves of enemies are trying to kill you. So this is just more of the same. I mean, it's just going through the various levels. Here it shows you, this is kind of cool. So on the main map, if you run into enemies that are also moving around in the map, which are shown by little trucks, it goes into this like top-down vertically scrolling type of level that is more reminiscent of the original Commando. Here, I mean, it just keeps going and going. So, yeah, that's page 17. All right. So anyway, so that's enough of Bionic Commando. if you've never played Bionic Commando for some reason, definitely, next Friday night or something when you have nothing to do and you're thinking of a game to play, load up Bionic Commando, get yourself used to the fact that you can't jump, and I promise you'll have a good time. Now, the next game, so this is kind of something I wanted to talk about, is that, all it has on the cover here, Simon's Quest and Bionic Commando, okay, whoopee. But as you flick through this magazine, there are a lot of, at least what are, in my opinion, heavy hitter games in this issue, which is awesome. And I would call Bionic Commando a heavy hitter, and I would absolutely call this next game, Life Force, a heavy hitter. This is, of course, a Konami spaceship shooter, and some people will sort of semi-erroneously call it the sequel to Gradius, which it's not. It's like a spin-off of Gradius. That's like semantics, right? But I mean, there is a Gradius 2, so that's the sequel to Gradius. But what's cool about this game, so you're still flying the Vic Viper, which is the same ship that was in Gradius. When you're playing this home version, it has the same style of power-up system as Gradius, where you're just picking up little like tokens, if you will, that are advancing the power-up scale or whatever at the bottom of the screen. And maybe it takes like one power-up you can have a speed up, or two power-ups you can have a missile. That's the way the home version of Life Force works. In the arcade, it's totally different. It's more like a traditional shooter where the enemies just drop the power-ups themselves, so you don't have that little cool power-up scale along the bottom. But I like them both. It's fine either way. Anyway, Life Force is absolutely one of my favorite shooters, if not my favorite. Gradius and Life Force are my two favorite shooters on the NES. I'm not going to try to say which one I think is better. Things I like better about Life Force, it oscillates back and forth between side-scrolling and vertically scrolling. So like the first stage is side-scrolling or horizontally scrolling, and then the second stage it switches to vertically scrolling. Third stage it goes back to horizontally scrolling. I think that's pretty cool. And then another thing that makes this game a little bit better, I think, than Gradius is highlighted right here on the first two pages, and that's the bosses. Now in Gradius, you really only have one boss that you keep having to fight over and over again. Like the end of the first level, this dude shows up and you have to kill him, but then at the end of the second level, it's like the same guy, but like maybe he moves a little bit faster. But in Life Force, you actually have distinct bosses for each level. Like at the end of the first level, you have this golem guy who's like this gigantic brain with an eyeball and arms, which is pretty awesome. And I don't know why you have King Tut as one of the bosses. That's a little bit weird. Giga over here seems like he's having a really good time. But that's definitely another thing that makes the game a little bit more varied than Gradius. And, here it's just going through, again, a walkthrough, showing you the first level. The first level's pretty cool. It's like you're flying through like these caverns, but it's like they're not caverns because it's like you're in this weird like biological atmosphere. I always thought like in the first level you get to these areas like over here where there's these big things that you have to actually shoot through, and it's like flesh that you're shooting through, and it like regenerates, so you have to hurry up and get through it. But I always thought of it as being like ground beef, like raw beef, because that's kind of what it looks like. And then down here it's showing you how to get past the first boss, which is pretty much you have to shoot him in his eye, which I would say seems pretty obvious when you're playing the game. And then it's showing you level 2, which is, so level 2 is the volcanic stage. Level 1 is called the cell stage. And so you're flying again. This is now vertically scrolling, and you're flying through these again, they're like rock caverns with these volcanoes that will erupt while you're going past them. So it makes sense that it would be called the volcanic stage. And then the boss for level 2 is sort of this, I don't know, what do you even want to call, like a spaceship or something with these 4 rotating arms. And that's pretty neat. And that's all they're going to show you for Life Force. They leave a little bit more for you to take care of with Life Force than they did with Bionic Commando. But now we get to Castlevania II Simon's Quest. And this is a game that I would say is not universally, but for the most part, not well regarded by gamers, and it's something I really don't understand. The biggest knock you hear about Castlevania II is that it's like impossible to beat the game if you don't have like a walkthrough or a guide. And I agree that that's true, but I can think of a lot of games from back then and more recently that you wouldn't be able to reasonably beat without a guide. For me, it's just not that big of a deal. In preparation for this read-through, I beat the game using a walkthrough, and I really enjoyed it. Things about the game that I will admit, the graphics really aren't that great. Even compared to the first Castlevania, I would say the first Castlevania, in my opinion, at least at times, looks better than Castlevania 2, especially Simon himself doesn't look so hot in Castlevania 2. The music, on the other hand, I think my all-time favorite Castlevania track is in Castlevania 2, Bloody Tears. And it's got its whole cool like day and night thing where it's not a real-time day and night, but it switches between daytime and nighttime. And when nighttime comes out, you could even be in a town, but like once the sun goes down, all the townspeople go hide in their houses, and there's like monsters in town. So if you need to go to a town and buy something, and it's nighttime, you have to wait until the sun comes up, and in the meantime, you're fighting monsters. And so I don't know. I think the game is pretty cool. The fact that you need to use a walkthrough to play through it, to me, is just not. It's not that big of a deal. Like, I will admit that this game is the weakest of the 3 Castlevania games on the NES, but that's not to say that it's a bad game. And it's kind of the same thing I'd say about Zelda 2. People are kind of down on Zelda 2 compared to Zelda 1. I still think it's a good game. So what do they have in here? It's probably just going to be, it's mostly a walkthrough. Here's the 5 different whips that you get. You just start off with a leather whip, but by the end of the game, you have a flame whip, and that's pretty cool. And here they're telling you about the whole day-night cycle thing that you have going on. And it's even showing here you're in town, and then it's nighttime, and then you got to fight monsters even though you're in town. And yeah, it really, like I say, it just gets into a walkthrough. You would not be able to beat the game just with the information that's here in this issue, but you would be able to get pretty far. They're telling you, here you need to buy the white crystal when you're in the town of Jova, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, this, how many pages long is this? That's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then there's going to be a fold-out map we'll see in a second. So, I mean, this will get you pretty far into the game. So, but as I said, I totally concede you cannot realistically beat this game without a walkthrough. You'll get to a point where you're just kind of stuck. Although the game does give you a lot of clues. Like if you play the game and you have a pad and paper, talk to the townspeople, and when they give you hints, write them down. Or there are areas like the game, instead of having like wall meat, the game has like wall clues where you'll find like a little, I think it's a book if I remember, in a wall, and when you read it, it tells you things that you need to do. So if you write those things down, that would definitely help you immensely. And then here there's a fold out. Again, I won't be able to get the whole thing in frame. Well, kind of. This is a fold out map. This is not really very helpful because the game doesn't have an overhead map for you to move around on, but it does look kind of cool anyway. And then on the other side is a Bionic Commando poster, and I'll see if I can get that all in the frame. I mean, I have to show it sideways. That kind of sucks, but I mean, there it is. So that looks pretty neat. And again, lucky us, the original owner of this magazine did not, cut it out and put it on their wall, as I or probably you would have done. Next we get into, this is just sort of like part 2 of their Super Mario Bros. 2 walkthrough. I already talked about Super Mario Bros. 2 on the last Nintendo Power read-through, the issue 1 read-through. So I don't really have too much more to say about it, unless if somehow this is like the first Let's Read that you're watching on my channel, in which case you didn't hear me talk about this game before. It's another example of a game that, at least for a long time, some people didn't hold in as high of regard as the other two. I happen to like this game quite a bit. I didn't have it when I was a kid, but I remember renting it, and of course my best friend had it, and so I would just play it over at his house. They do kind of go over some of the same stuff, because like what I just did, Nintendo of America is not assuming that you read issue 1 of Nintendo Power, so they're kind of going back over some of the basics again, like the difference between the 4 characters, showing you how the warp zone works. And then it just gets back into a walkthrough, starting off with level 3-1. So like I said earlier, issue number 1 of Nintendo Power had a walkthrough of the first 2 worlds. And then here's World 3. I don't remember how far it goes. All right, just World 3. So still not the whole game. I don't believe I've ever read issue 3 of Nintendo Power, so I don't know if it has even more Super Mario Bros. 2 coverage, but I would kind of doubt it. And next we have Renegade. And this was a Taito arcade game. It's a beat-em-up game. And really, I would give it the distinction of being the first beat-em-up game that it sort of set the stage for what we now know as a beat-em-up game. So Streets of Rage, Final Fight, Golden Axe, etc., etc. This was the first game that sort of had the level layouts, the way you could sort of move in the Z direction in the screen, not just back and forth. Like, people talk about games like Kung Fu as being a beat 'em up game, and to me that's like a side-scrolling action game. Like, I don't like getting all weird about, like, you know, the semantics involved with like categorizing games. Like, I don't really care what you want to call them. But to me, I don't look at games like Kung Fu or Vigilante as being the same kind of game as you know, what I consider to be a beat 'em up game. So and as far as those games go, again, Renegade was like really the first one. That all being said, this really isn't that great of a game, at least on the NES. I don't believe I've ever played the arcade version, which would actually be pretty cool to try out. But Renegade is still definitely neat to play, just sort of as a historical artifact. And it's not a bad game. It's just, I think the controls really aren't all that great. The graphics and whatnot are all right, but it's just, to me at least, the game's not really all that fun. Like, if I want to play a beat 'em up on the NES, I'd rather play, say, Double Dragon, or especially Double Dragon 2, which is an awesome game. But and then here they're just going to show you, I don't know how far, I think this is only 4 pages, but they're showing you the moves that you can do. You can do running punches, jump kicks, a running jump kick, sit on. So I never even tried to do that. You can sit on a guy and punch him while you're sitting on him. That's pretty cool. And this shows you stage 1, and then they get into stage 2 over here, and then that's it. So that's all you get from them. So I'm not saying the game's not worth checking out, but if you go to your local video game store and they have a copy of Renegade and they want like $20 for it, I'd probably skip it. Next we get into, this is another heavy hitter in my opinion, Rare's RC Pro-Am. And this is one of my absolute favorite Nintendo games from when I was a kid, but I still love playing this game now. For anybody that doesn't know what RC Pro-Am is, as the title implies, it's a radio-controlled racing game, but it's very fantastical in that, as they tell you here, you can pick up missiles and bombs and use those to knock your opponents back, not out of the race, but knock them back. It's the kind of thing where when we were kids, if we could have had our remote control cars shoot missiles, we absolutely would have done that. But of course that was not possible, thank goodness. So this first screen is really just, this first page is really just going through the game's mechanics. The fact that you can pick up these sort of power-ups, if you will, along the track. There's like 4, there's 3. There's turbo, engine, and tires are sort of the 3 characteristics, if you want to call them, of your car. And you can pick up to 4 power-ups for each of those 3 things. And it'll show you, like, between races, You know, oh, you've picked up 2 of the sticky tires, for instance. And they all do sort of what you would expect them to do. But then at the same time, you're also picking up these lettered tiles that will spell Nintendo across the bottom of the screen. And once you spell Nintendo, you get a new car. But when you get a new car, everybody gets a new car. So it's kind of not that cool. And then once you get a new car, you have to go through the whole process of powering it up again. The missiles are, of course, great for trying to mitigate the attack of the orange car that somehow just cheats and goes all the way around the track. Bombs won't help you there. But if you're already in the lead and you're trying to hold the lead, then the bombs are great. But I always find with the bombs, I'm just not as accurate with them as I am with the missiles. They're also showing you can pick up roll cages. A roll cage makes you temporarily invincible. If you drive through a oil slick puddle, you'll start spinning, and if you hit the side of the track, your car will like blow up, and then it takes a minute for it to sort of regenerate, and then you can keep going. But if you have the roll cage, you will still spin and stop on the edge of the track, but you can keep going right away. So it helps. You have these things. I never knew these were called zippers. So if you drive across one of these zippers, it's like a little speed boost. And so sometimes in the game it'll have like a long straightaway where there's like 4 of these zippers in a row, so you can go down them real fast. But like the enemy cars are real good about using the zippers as well. So if you don't use the zipper, you're going to be in trouble. What else? I think here now it's going to go through a bunch of tracks. I don't even know how many tracks this game has. It's a lot. I've never actually beaten the game. So there's 4 cars that compete, and all you have to do is not come in last in order to keep going. So you can come in 3rd, that's fine. You come in 4th, it's just like instant game over. Next we move into the classified information section, which is just a tips section. And the first game they talk about here is Data East's Kid Nicky Radical Ninja. And, you know, it's weird because I feel like I see a lot of advertisements and a lot of coverage for Kid Nicky in a lot of these old magazines. But if you play the game, it's really just a very, very average side-scrolling action game. It's not bad. It's just like, it's the game where you would rent it on a Friday night, and by Sunday, you did not feel sad having to return it to the video store. Over here, we've got some tips for Renegade, including how to get a hamburger, which will, I guess, refill some of your health. You deserve a break today. Hamburgers with revitalizing powers sometimes drop from above. So that's pretty neat. You can apparently, there's a round select. It's like, stage select. So that's pretty neat. And then extra hearts the easy way. And I guess the heart will appear that will score you a 1-up if you grab it. So that's pretty helpful as well. Over here, you want to talk about helpful. Kid Icarus, which is another game that I really love. The Kid Icarus was actually the first game that I ever beat when I was a kid. Crack the code of the treasure rooms. So you would go into these rooms, and there were all of these clay pots with question marks on them. And you had to break the pots in a certain order, because one of the pots has a little like baby Reaper, Grim Reaper, which this is calling the god of poverty. So what you want to do is you want to keep breaking pots and then just leaving the items there. And if you find the god of poverty, all of the items disappear. So but basically what this is showing you is the proper order to break the pots in, so that you never find the god of poverty, and then you can keep all of the items that were in the room in the first place, which is very, very helpful. Over here is this comic that was in, I don't know when they stopped with the Howard and Nestor comics, but obviously it doesn't make sense to like read it on a video like this, so we're just going to skip past it. And then we get into the Counselor's Corner, which is really just more tips. But, some of these were definitely common questions, because they were questions I had when I was a kid. In the first quest of Legend of Zelda, where is level 7? Which kind of gets to one of the things I'm talking about. Like, how would you have known to go into this one area and blow the whistle to get to that level? Now, maybe the game gave you a clue somewhere, but like that's what I'm saying about Castlevania 2. Like, pretty much anything that you have to do in Castlevania 2, at some point the game gave you some kind of nebulous clue to tell you that you were supposed to do that. And then over here, how do I get into level 9? And, it's sort of the same thing. You have to bomb. And I remember for sure the game does give you some kind of clue that you have to bomb this rock to get into level 9. I don't remember exactly what it says. And then there's a couple questions over here about Zelda's second quest, which I've still never beaten the second quest of Zelda. So that would be a fun idea for a live stream, I think. Now we have, believe it or not, we still have questions about the original Super Mario Brothers. Where are the warp zones and how do I get to them? I mean, I think we all managed to figure out on our own when we were kids how to get to most of the warp zones. That's not too tough. Here is a question about Metroid. How do I defeat the mini bosses Ridley and Kraid? This is not a game that I had when I was a kid. I used to go watch my best friend play it. Metroid's a great game. I mean, I don't know what I need to say about that. Kid Icarus, where do I find the credit card? And so it's showing you where to do that. I don't remember having to get a credit card in order to beat the game. But I mean, I beat this game in like 1988 or 89 and haven't beat it since. So I don't really remember everything there is to know about it. Now we get to another one of these sort of deep dives. In this case, it's Golgo 13. And some people out there may not know this. I didn't used to know this. Golgo 13 is a manga or manga, I don't know how to say it, series, comic book basically series in Japan that started in the late 60s. So it kind of makes, when you see some of the character styling in Golgo 13, it's like, this seems kind of weird. But when you realize that it's because it's from these illustrated books that came out in the 60s, it kind of makes more sense. And, Golgo 13, if you play the game, it's really not that great of a game. Just as far as like a lot of the standard gameplay goes, like in the side-scrolling sections, you're like, man, this game is really pretty rough. But the only thing I could say is that if you treat it more like an interactive movie, I think the game becomes a little bit more enjoyable. Like if you don't let yourself get too hung up on some of the gameplay, although some of the gameplay is really cool, like just the side-scrolling sections aren't that good. But then randomly you'll get into this weird, like, it's like this sniper level. It's like somebody was trying to shoot you and like the game switches view and all of a sudden you have a sniper rifle and you're sniping all these bad guys. That's pretty cool. But like I said, if instead of getting hung up on the gameplay, if you get a little bit more into the plot, it's really not too bad of a game. It probably, if you had gotten it as a Christmas present or something back then, maybe you wouldn't be too into it. But it's the kind of game now, again, like I said about Bionic Commando, although I am not trying to put Golgo 13 on the same level as Bionic Commando. But, maybe some Friday night or something when you want to play a game and you can't figure out what to play, give Golgo 13 a try. Certainly, this issue gives you a little bit of a walkthrough to help get you started. Next, we get to, here's another heavy hitter, in my opinion, Blaster Master. And sadly, Blaster Master is not a game that I ever played when I was a kid. I didn't have it. I didn't know anybody else that had it. But you ask anybody who did play Blaster Master back in the day, and they will have nothing but good things to say about the game, and rightfully so. This is it doesn't say it here anywhere, but this is a Sunsoft game. So it has the characteristic awesome Sunsoft soundtrack. It has a very strange plot. You play the role of this kid who has a pet frog. It has like a cutscene, if you want to call it that, at the beginning of the game. You have this pet frog. The pet frog escapes out your bedroom window or something and goes down a hole. And you have to go like try to get your frog out of the hole. But like you jump into the hole and there just happens to be like this armored car down there. And so you're just like, well, I better just, jump in this armored car real quick and go find my, now mutated pet frog because the frog gets exposed to like, radioactivity and whatnot. Very strange plot, but who really cares about the plot with a game like this? The cool thing about Blaster Master is that you're driving this armored car, which first of all, that already, the way the controls feel for the armored car feel great. But you can also, whenever you want, jump out of the armored car and just have your little guy, which you need to use to like get to certain areas. Well, there's like, you can go like underwater, like you can just sort of jump off of one of these platforms and go underwater. You can do that with your armored car, but as you might imagine, that doesn't handle that well underwater. But what you can sort of do is like park the car on the beach and then jump out and get in the water, and then you can like swim around. You also go to these areas of these levels where it turns into this overhead thing instead of being side-scrolling. And you can find a lot of power-ups in those areas, but then like the boss battles are in those kind of areas. And so the game just has a lot of variety, and I mean it's got great graphics, a great soundtrack, and like, for lack of a better word, compelling gameplay. And so, as I said already several times in this episode, if you haven't played Blaster Master, you should really check it out, because it's an awesome game. I have no idea how much a game like this goes for, but I mean, I wouldn't think it would be that much. At least I hope not. Now we get into video shorts, and these are, well, it says right here, video shorts is a quick rundown of some of the latest NES game packs with up-to-the-minute information and descriptions of what's just over the video game horizon. So these are all games that are either, at the time of this issue's release, are either newly out or are about to come out. I'm not going to speak in detail about all these games, but the ones that I think are worth talking about, I will. Xenophobe is another Sunsoft game. Unfortunately, it's not a good one. Cycross is a game that I've talked about already on the show on another read-through. I can't remember when. Cycross, you're like riding like this hover mini bike. It's like a side-scrolling game, but you're like rescuing these people that are just like in the road, and you're fighting against other hover bike things and picking up fuel. And it's kind of a hard game to describe, but it's a pretty fun game. Like Cycross would have been like a solid weekend rental back in the day. Even if I saw Cycross for like $5 at a video game store, I got to be honest and say I don't think I would grab it. Lee Trevino's Fighting Golf, pretty decent golf game actually. Now, by far and away the best golf game on the NES is NES Open Tournament Golf. So any other golf game you want to talk about is coming in second. But it is a pretty cool game. It's actually an SNK game, the Neo Geo people. So that's pretty cool. What do we got over here? Oh, here we got a couple of other heavy hitters, at least in my opinion. 1943. Now, 1942 on the NES is not very good. 1943 is one of the better vertically scrolling shooters on the system, and definitely worth checking out. And then down here is Jackal by Konami, which is a really cool game. It's sort of like a Akari Warriors Commando style, like overhead, I would call it a shooter, but you're driving a Jeep instead of just walking around, and you're supposed to rescue hostages. So like you come along these like huts and you blow the hut up, and then all these hostages come out that you rescue. So it's kind of like Choplifter as far as just that goes. Your Jeep has like a gun that only shoots, like it always shoots up. It doesn't matter which way your Jeep is oriented, the gun shoots straight up. And then you have a secondary weapon which starts off as just grenades, which aren't that great, but then get upgraded to rockets, and those shoot in whatever direction the Jeep is facing. Very fun game. You can play it 2-player cooperative, which is also really cool. Jackal is definitely a game that if you don't have it, you should get it. Hudson's Adventure Island. I talked about this game in pretty good detail in a previous episode of Let's Read. So I'm not going to say too much about it, except to say that it's a great game. It is sort of a reskinning, if you will, of the original Wonder Boy. So the Sega game, because Wonder Boy was published by Sega, but not actually produced by Sega. And Sega had the rights to like the Wonder Boy characters, but the company that actually developed Wonder Boy, who I can't remember at the moment, they actually controlled the rights to the game itself. And so they were able to turn around and relicense the game to Hudson, who created this whole separate storyline and separate characters for it. But a really cool game. And then Mag Max. So Mag Max is a side-scrolling shooter where you start off as like this little ship, but you pick up body parts where like it's like Voltron style. You can turn into like it shows him right here, but you turn into like this whole huge robot, and that sounds really cool. But the problem is that as you turn into this huge robot, your hitbox gets humongous, and so like the bigger you get, the harder it is not to get hit, and so that's kind of a bummer. But the game is actually pretty fun to play. Now they have this separate section here called the classics, and that's because these are all, classic arcade ports that were brought to the NES. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these. The first one here, Donkey Kong Classics, I actually had that. And not because somebody got it for me randomly. I actually went to Toys R Us and picked it out. And just to show you how dumb I was as a kid, my whole reasoning for that was that you got 2 games on 1 cartridge, so it was like better like value for money because you get Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. And I just got it home and played it for a little while and just got tired of it because it's just not the kind of game I was looking for on the NES, and so I don't really know what I was thinking. Down here you have the Tengen release of Pac-Man. I mean, it's Pac-Man. If you like Pac-Man, it's a far cry from being arcade perfect. So I would say that. I think I would have expected that you could do a better version of Pac-Man on the NES, but I am not a game programmer, so I don't know. And then on this side, it's kind of interesting. You have these 3 games that were all published by HAL Laboratories: Defender 2, Millipede, and Joust. And it's interesting because if you load any one of these games up, they have like the same title screen music, which I don't know why that would be. Defender 2 is actually, I would say out of these 5 games it's showing here, Defender 2 is by far and away the best. Defender is often hailed as one of the all-time greatest arcade games, at least of sort of the golden age of arcade games. I mean, this game runs very fast on the NES, like fast and smooth, and does a good job, in my opinion, of recreating the feeling of playing Defender. And then we have 2 more here, 2 shooters, Xevious and Galaga. I freely admit that, Xevious takes its rightful place in the pantheon of classic video games. It was like a trailblazing game for shooters. I just am not that into the game. When I was a kid, my friend Steven had Xevious, and we didn't really spend that much time playing it because I don't think he liked it that much either. And then here's they don't even have a screenshot for Tecmo Bowl. We haven't seen the final program yet, but the arcade version is really great. Sometime this season, you'll be able to challenge a friend and tackle this new game. And of course, Tecmo Bowl, one of the greatest football games, in my opinion, ever released, along with its sequel, Tecmo Super Bowl. Some games that stick out here, Track and Field 2, only because, the original Track and Field was a pretty popular game. When I was a kid, it's really just button mashing, as all of these Olympic-style games are, but it's still pretty fun. Track and Field 2 added some new events, like I remember swimming. John Elway's quarterback, the same kid I just mentioned that had Xevious, also had John Elway's quarterback. And I used to kind of enjoy playing that game only because I figured out this one play that you could run on offense where I could score a touchdown like every single time. Over here, Bubble Bobble. My best friend Jonathan had Bubble Bobble. I used to play it at his house. I used to watch him play it, and he would get deep into that game. The music for Bubble Bobble is so repetitive, but I love it anyway just because it takes me back to being like 11 years old and sitting on the floor in front of my friend's TV. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I was a huge fan of the cartoon show back then. My friend, the same friend that had Bubble Bobble, got this game when it came out. I used to watch him play it. I could just never get into it. I know there are a lot of people out there that like the game. For whatever reason, I just never got interested in it. And even trying to play it now, I'm not going to say it's a bad game because, like I said, a lot of people out there like it, but I'm just not with you on that one. Now we get into the players poll. And again, this has not been torn out of the magazine. They have this little card for you to fill out. Here's like a questionnaire. Of the game reviews listed below, which 2 did you enjoy the most? And then these are all the game reviews that were in this issue. I'm not going to read all these things, but they have all these things for you to answer. And then I think it's back here. these are all the NES games that were either out or imminently coming out at the time of this magazine's release. And so they basically wanted you to select a few of them and like say which ones you were looking forward to. GH and I like, what 2 games would you most like to see reviewed in a future issue of Nintendo Power? What 3 games are you planning to purchase next? Please indicate in order of preference your 5 favorite games. And so you would pick all of those games off of this list. And if you filled this out and sent it in, then you got entered into this drawing. And grand prize, which only one person would win, was to pick any 10 games of your choice. I guess any 10 games at all, because if you look at the image that's back here, it's showing third-party games along with first-party NES games, or first-party Nintendo games. So obviously that would have been awesome. And then second prize, you would get a radio-controlled car. So that's pretty neat. I don't know if this is actually a good radio-controlled car or not, but when you were 12 years old, man, like pretty much any radio-controlled car was a good one, unless you were like a lucky enough kid to have like a Tamiya car with a gas engine in it or something. And then third prize, you won a copy of RC Pro-Am. So to be very honest, when I was a kid, unless this is a really souped up RC car, I would have rather had the copy of RC Pro-Am myself. And then there is a fourth prize, which is a Nintendo Power jersey that you can see Howard Phillips himself modeling there. NES Journal. So this is just sort of maybe like news or other articles of interest. Here they talk about the introduction of the Power Set.
You better get ready for the most challenging Nintendo system ever.
Ready? Let's do it.
The new Power Pad. It's only available in Nintendo's new Power Set. Now you're playing with body power. You've got to run, jump, faster, higher. The Nintendo Power Pad puts you in total control. You are the game. You are the power. Now you're playing with power, body power. You get the Power Pad, Control Deck, Zapper, and 3 games only in Nintendo's exciting new Power Set.
Now, if you had asked me before I read this issue when I thought the Power Set came out, and just, it shows here, but just to get everybody on board, the Power Set was the NES with the Power Pad and the cartridge that had Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and Track and Field. So it came with the Zapper as well. I would have guessed that came out in like 1990. So I was kind of surprised that it was already, because it even says in here, the system will start showing up on store shelves in September. So I was pretty surprised about that. I actually have a Power Pad, and I've never tried it. It's like folded up in the closet because I found it, at a thrift store or something. And I've still never plugged it in to check it out. People ask me, like, oh, you should do that on a live stream. And that is not going to happen. And then over here, we have sort of this little profile, if you will, of Rare Limited. The Tale of Two Brothers, and of course it's talking about the Stamper brothers, Chris and Tim Stamper, who I would really say rose to a whole new level of fame when Rare developed Donkey Kong Country. But Rare developed quite a few games for the NES. Rare developed games for home computers in their home country of the UK long before they started making NES games. But they show 3, or they mention 3 games that Rare developed for the NES here: Wizards and Warriors, RC Pro-Am, and Slalom. Slalom, I don't know how excited I would get about that, but Wizards and Warriors and RC Pro-Am were both like big name games when I was a kid. This was pretty interesting. So this is this fall television preview, and they have 3 shows here that they showcase: TV 101, Night Watch, and Dirty Dancing. And I had actually never heard of any of these. Like, of course, I've heard of the Dirty Dancing movie, but like I didn't know they ever made it into a TV series. None of these shows made it past 1 season, so that's probably part of the reason that I've never heard of any of them. But what I thought was interesting is I was looking closely. So TV 101, it says TV 101 is a story of a young teacher who attempts to create the first high school video newspaper, blah, blah, blah. But if you look, there's Matt LeBlanc from Friends. Obviously, this is a few years before, 5 years? When did Friends even start? I don't remember. Several years before Friends started. There's Matt LeBlanc. For Night Watch, that is Benjamin Bratt, who, on top of doing a few movies, was on Law and Order for like 14 years. And then that is, I believe her name is pronounced Melora Hardin, who played Jan, Michael's girlfriend, or first girlfriend, on The Office. Jan Levinson / Jan Levinson Gould. So I just thought that was pretty cool that I spotted those. And then over here, so this is kind of reminiscent of one of the other recent magazine read-throughs we did, the Game Pro Celebrity Video Gamers. We have this Celebrity Profiles, and this is 3 NFL players. The Chicago Bears wide receiver Ron Morris, Indianapolis Colt running back Eric Dickerson, and Houston Oiler defensive end Sean Jones. And they're just, as I said in that other read-through, are these actually quotes from these players, or are they just from publicists? I have no idea. But they just go through like the games that they're into playing. One thing that I thought was funny in here, though, Ron Morris says, it took me 2 days to get to Tyson and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Once you learn how each boxer fights and the pass key tips, it's pretty easy. True. I felt good. I felt pretty good that I was about to beat Mike Tyson. And then I lent the game to Walter Payton. I think he's still trying to get to Tyson. I just got a new game pack, and I'm going to go at it again. So Sweetness, R.I.P., was the kind of guy that you'd lend your games to and you wouldn't get him back. But if you lend something to Walter Payton and he didn't give it back, you weren't going to say anything. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of a funny story. Again, whether it's even true or not, who knows? Then we get to the mailbox. I don't even like reading through the mailbox. As I've said before, I am of the belief that all these letters are fake. So yeah. NES Achievers. This is when, people could mail in photographs of high scores and get their name hopefully printed in Nintendo Power. Whenever I flick through one of these old Nintendo Power issues, I always look for Steve Wozniak's name because he used to send in his high scores for Tetris on the Game Boy. So obviously not in a magazine this old. Oh, down here they give you instructions on how to take a proper screenshot. Then we get into this Power Players section. I've talked about this before. It's basically where kids could kind of write in and like they had sort of license to go ahead and brag about their video game conquests. And then somebody would be lucky enough to get featured in the Power Player profile, which in this case is Pete the Natural Bryn from Windsor, Connecticut, who is 17 years old but looks about 24. And is rocking, I don't know if you can see that or not, but he's rocking an Anthrax jersey, so that's pretty cool. Or Anthrax t-shirt, rather. This was something that was featured in every of the old issues of Nintendo Power, and that is the top 30. It's cool to see stuff like this just because this way you can see, what was popping on the NES in the fall of 1988. So no surprise that Legend of Zelda is number 1, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out number 2, Metroid number 3. Super Mario Brothers, if for no other reason than it's the game that everybody had, Super Mario Brothers is at number 4 also. It was an awesome game. But where's Super Mario Brothers 2? I guess that game may not, there it is at 28. That game may not have actually been out in stores yet when this magazine was published. So, because they also have Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link on here, and that game had not come out yet either. Kid Icarus, number 5, Double Dragon, number 6. Ice Hockey. Ice Hockey is a game I never played until I was in college. I used to play Blades of Steel at a friend's house when I was a kid. I didn't even know that ice hockey existed. And then I had this job while I was in college, and my coworker was telling me, oh, you got to play ice hockey, and you can, you can put your team together, and there's skinny guy, regular guy, and fat guy, and and that's when I finally, tracked down a copy of the game, because this would have been in 1998 when you could get these games for nothing, and finally played it. Here they're showing you what's coming up in the next issue. Here they're mentioning here, Zelda still on top. Link is closing in. Players are so excited about the not yet released Link that they already rank it high on their list. Watch out for Zelda 2. And then it says here you'll start seeing Zelda 2 in stores in December. The game was supposed to come out earlier than that, and I think I must have missed it. There was definitely a reference to it here somewhere that Zelda 2 had gotten delayed, and it was due to this quote-unquote chip shortage, which I say quote-unquote because I'm still not sure if that was really a thing or not. I was hoping to find it in here somewhere. Oh, yeah, here it is. Dear Zelda, I'm here in Kyoto with my programmer, Mr. Miyamoto, and I'm afraid I have some bad news to tell you. Are you sitting down? Anyway, they tell me I will not be able to begin my journey until the new year. It has something to do with computer chips or something. I know we hope to spend the holidays together, but I'm sure you can hold on a little bit longer. I miss you desperately. Yours forever, Link. And then it has sort of this little subtext here. Sorry for the bad news. Link will be available in very limited quantities in November. My recollection is that my best friend got Zelda 2 for Christmas this year. So maybe his parents were able to find him a copy, or maybe my memory is just faulty. But certainly stuff like this was the case with a lot of games, especially the marquee games. They were often hard to come across. Whether or not this chip shortage was a real thing, or if it was just, the first time Nintendo was doing their sort of now famous artificial scarcity, we really don't know. Anyway, what do we have on the last page here? Just the mail-in card if you wanted to subscribe to Nintendo Power. And it was saying if you give this card to your friend, so you'd fill out your information here and they would fill out their information here to actually subscribe to the magazine, they would send you a Nintendo Power, they're calling it a pin, but it's more like one of those buttons that you'd put, on your jacket or your backpack or something. But yeah, so that's it. Oh, that's a cool ad on the back there, Power Tools. I don't know. It just looks pretty neat the way they put that together there. There's the NES Max. I had that when I was a kid and hated it, but the NES Advantage was pretty darn cool. But anyway, that is it for Nintendo Power issue number 2 from September and October of 1988. I am looking forward to doing some more read-throughs this season. I don't currently have issue number 3 of Nintendo Power. I just need to track one down on eBay or whatnot. But I do have some other magazines that I'm very excited about doing, including issue number 1 of Electronic Gaming Monthly. So keep an eye on the channel for that to come out in the near future. So that's going to do it for this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.